That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Hello, and welcome to the podcast at the intersection of faith and fear, where every week we discuss what scares us in order to find what saves us. This is the fear of God. Speaking to you right now is one of your hosts, Nathan Rouse, and typically with me is fellow co-host? I don't know what a co-host is, everyone, but a fellow co-host, Reed Lackey, was here. He was here, but he seemed kind of worked up, y'all, a little emotional. He was rocking in place, and he kept murmuring, "This is our podcast. This is our podcast," just over and over. It was a little creepy, to be honest, coming from old Lackey. Hopefully, he'll be present of mind and present of person again soon. In the meantime, allow me to welcome you back into our series on learning how to lose, titled In the Morning. This series is meant to help us meditate on loss as we navigate life inside of a pandemic, giving even deeper resonance to our regular mantra of assessing what scares us in order to find what saves us. But, as per usual, I'm getting ahead of myself, because here at the Fear of God, we explore. We don't explain. Except for right now, when I explain that you can listen to the Fear of God at your nearest podcast platform. You can watch the Fear of God on YouTube, and you can browse the Fear of God on the web at thefearofgodpodcast.com, wherein you will find episode archives and merchandise, including cell phone cases, t-shirts, campaign buttons, face masks. Thank you to those of you, some of you who just recently bought face masks, magnets, pillows. Riri, welcome. Where did you go? There you are. Hey, brother. Are you okay? That was a little creepy there for a minute.
Are you mad? I am your co-host.
You're
Co-host with the most.
Custard.
It's co-host with the most.
Custard.
Mr. Rouse.
Yes.
Yes.
Welcome back, Riri.
Thank you. It's good to be back. Beetlejuice.
Would you, that was perfect. I feel like, I don't know, that feels like something I would have done, and so I'm so really happy that it happened from you. Yes, thank you, Reed. Thank you, Beetlejuice. So, listeners, we've got just two announcements for you here, one from me, one from Riri. We are still crowdsourcing these audience Watchins. We're gonna have one today from a longtime listener. Thank you, longtime listener. You guys got a taste a couple weeks back. We've gotten several others in. We are building a catalog of you lovely people. Yes, you right now in your car, Blake, or at your work, Blake, listening to this podcast. Blake, he's so faithful.
He hears it before we do. I don't know how he does that, but he really does.
I know. I mean, it's Tuesday, 6 a.m. Blake's like, "Good episode, boys." I'm like, thanks. How did you pull that off?
It's so awesome. It's so awesome.
Hasn't even posted yet. We just put the finishing touches on the edit. Regardless, we are crowdsourcing listener versions of the Whatcha Watchin', Whatcha Readin', Whatcha Listenin' to jingle. Would love to have you, listener, you and your spouse, you and your family, make it a family affair. You and your cul-de-sac, you can practice a little physical distancing. Just turn that memo on, hold it out, and have a crowd sing into it. Don't get too close to each other. But, we want to hear from you. We want to hear you and hear from you. Record that on your voice memo recorder, and send it to fearofgodpodcast@gmail.com. It's going to be one of those nights, everybody. Read
the voice in the house.
The verse in the house. You curdy custard. So we want people to send their audience. That's the note.
Yes,
that is the call to action. Send your audience stuff.
Yes.
I want you to get to your audience note too. Reed, I had such a great swell of empathy for you listening to last week's episode. Listeners won't know, but on a par unequaled in maybe our 3+ year history, we had technological gaffes aplenty. On top of that, Nathan was a bit of an emotional wreck. On top of that, because of my emotional wreckness, I was just out of my head, and we had a guest in the form of longtime friend of the fog, Ian Olson. He and I are prone to jump into the silly pool, and poor Reed is just desperately trying to like Sandra Bullock on that river with 2 blinded kids or whatever it was. I don't remember that dumb movie. Just trying to get to the other shore.
Like, boy, don't make me sick Jean-Claude Van Damme on you. Okay, it's gonna happen.
Anyway, so yes, I had a great swell of affection and empathy for your experience on last week's episode.
Much appreciated.
Anyway, so
much appreciated.
Audience, send us your what you watching. What you got, Riri?
So just like you had a big, tremendous emotional reaction to last week's episode, we are presuming, based on some of the feedback we get, that sometimes you, the listeners, also get certain reactions. Either it sparks some thought or it sparks some feelings. It moves you, inspires you, as whatever. Now, we ask every single episode in the closing credits, we ask for an iTunes review, an Apple Podcast review, and those are fantastic. We love those. Please, by all means, share those. But more importantly than that, how listeners can find out about the show is by your good word of mouth. And so what we're asking for in this one is particularly focusing on the month of August. We are asking you in a way that we're in a pithy way, titling Sharing is Caring. If you have heard an episode in 2020, or shoot, if you've heard one, further than that, something that's just really resonated with you that you want to share about, share it to your socials and tag us in it. There is a contest associated with this. So there is a reward, a benefit, if you will, for doing this. But more than anything, we just want to hear from you. So there's 2 main things. First of all, we want you to share to whatever social media platform you have, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever the kids are doing these days. So share it to the socials and tag us in it. Otherwise, we won't know that you shared it, and that would be a real shame. The other thing that we want you to do is email us, fearofgodpodcast@gmail.com, and you can perhaps get maybe a little bit more personal if you want to. Just tell us something if you enjoyed a conversation, thought a moment was funny, liked a thought, maybe disliked a thought and wanted to challenge it a little bit. Whatever it is that, no, come on.
That's,
the dialogue, okay? It's the dialogue.
Right. I'm just not sure I want people to be like, hey, this Spirit God thing, everybody. That Nathan's an idiot. Tag, contest entered.
Yeah, you can disagree with us in the email, but don't disagree with us on social media.
Okay. That's all I was sort of critiquing there. Yes.
That'll just get weird. But no, by all means. So share us on social media, share an episode, share a comment, share the show in general. Share us on social media, tag us on social media when you share it. And then by all means, email us and get a little bit more personal if you want to. But sharing is caring. So through the month of August, we're coming up on, I can't believe it, 200 episodes, and the month of August will also mark our fourth anniversary, which is absolutely crazy when I think about it. So,
is it? Are we But wait,
it'll be 4 years.
Entering the 4th year.
No, we're entering the 5th year. We will have been doing it for 4 years. Yes, we will have been doing it for 4 years once August comes around. So, when the man comes around. That's nuts. Oh, I love that song. So, yes, sharing is caring. Share to us on social media. Email us. That would be really very much appreciated. Any other comments, Nathan? In that case.
Beetlejuice!
It's showtime. That was so high-pitched. That was so high-pitched.
Just trying to vary up the bit, buddy. We're trying to vary up the bit. Speaking of varying up the bit.
What you watching? What you reading? What you listening to?
That is awesome.
That is from our longtime listener friend Dino, host over at the podcast. So you can by all means go check him out. But
he is a longtime listener. Thank you, Dino. Thank you for responding with that loveliness. That was like funk. That was like
funky. Oh, I know. That was a real sexy groove, man. Like that was really like in the pocket.
A funky fog.
It was a funky fog or a foggy funk. I'm not quite sure. Don't say it too many times too fast.
Yeah.
That'll get weird.
Yeah.
Oh.
Mhm.
So yeah, Nathan, why don't you regale us with what you've been watching, reading, listening to?
Is the plan to do another one next week also?
Likely not.
Oh, okay. Well, good. Then I'll do a twofer here. So
A
I
twofer
mentioned
Sutherland?
No. I am Dr. Schreiber, and the monsters have enlisted me in their clandestine work.
The direction he got for Proyas was clearly like, can you be a troll? Can you do that? Can you just kind of, what's your best troll impression? What can you do there? So yeah, that was it.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So I believe I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I had begun and want to close the knot or untie the knot. I can't remember the exact verbiage they use in it on Dark Season 3. I did finish Dark Season 3.
All right.
And I was a bit trepidatious going into it, but I enjoyed it. I am withholding the bulk of the thoughts because there aren't a ton yet.
Please do.
For the possibility of not just you watching it, for the maybe possibility of us getting back to it.
Hey.
Returning to Old Wyndon.
I have one very deliberate question. I'm going to ask it deliberately,
Okay.
and I want a
Was ist
deliberate
das?
answer. Was ist das?
Yes, they do say that a lot.
Good. My question is, I'm not interested yet in finding out whether you were satisfied with the ending or whether the film had a concrete resolution. Not interested in that. A TV show. It's essentially a 30-hour film. But
Tomato.
So, but I do want to know, did they pull any version of in the last final seconds? I'll relate this to the most recent series finale of X-Files, where in the final few seconds they throw like a curveball that you just know they're never going to resolve because that's the end of it. Without describing whether or not they resolve all the plot threads, do they end on one of those frustrating sort of notes?
It is.
Or does
It is a closed loop.
It is a closed loop. Perfect. That's all I
mean,
need to know. Great.
What I haven't done a ton of research on this yet, so there's no like spoilers attached to this comment, but my understanding based on listening to some other pop culture podcast conversations about Dark is they set out with a 3-season arc in mind.
Perfect.
I do think, I can't remember, I think season 1 is 10 or 12 episodes. It's at least 10. Whereas 2 and 3 are 8. So there's a world where I think maybe they could have benefited from another episode or 2 per season. Just because season 3, if it felt like, and it did to me, if it felt like season 2 stood in place a decent amount, season 3 is like, oh my God, this is moving at blazing speeds and my head is not going to stop spinning until the end. It's
like that roller coaster that right after it gets to the on ramp, it pauses you for a second and then just takes off like a rocket. That's exactly. So it's like season 1, we're moving up to the season 2, 3. That's what
I will say this to a positive and a neutral. The positive is I did enjoy 3 more than I was worried. How am I trying to say that? I didn't love 2 and was worried, okay, am I just going to watch 3 to check a box? It did not have that feeling, so that is good. Awesome. That said, I still love the intimacy of Dark season 1, and they just don't ever really do that again, which is what it is. The show basically becomes a 0 and a 1. But so that was one. So Dark 3 was 1. Do you have 1 or 2? I'm happy to defer to you for a moment.
I have. Well, I'll 1. I have 1.
We'll go do your 1. I'll sandwich.
Okay. Hey. So
that's a funky
pause. I just happen to have it right here because Nathan, I have one thing to say. My wife and I, if you were mad, if you were frustrated that I completed The Leftovers, without you, well then we had to go back because we
Look at me, I'm Reed. Friendship is just a word to me. It's not a substantive thing.
What does it mean? Look at me. Why would anybody brag about that? Like, why would anybody want, look at me, friendship is just a word, blah, blah, blah.
Right. That's my point. It's like, it doesn't mean anything. It's just,
so yes, we are watching Lost. We started like yesterday and are already midway through season 2. That's an exaggeration.
I was going to say that's, wow.
No, we started.
Is your child eating?
No, he can think for himself.
Right.
Like priorities.
Dharma brand.
Ranch dressing. So, yes, we started a little over a week ago as of the recording, and we are more than halfway through season 2 right now. I tell you, man, it's
which
like
means you
old
are.
friends.
Are you at the tailies yet?
They've well been established. Yeah, where we are.
How early is that into?
It's like second episode into.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, I should say this. The second episode into, they show up. They begin to be unpacked in episode 3. So
so what's happening? Yeah. Just warm my heart with.
Oh, man. So we had a couple of frustrating episodes because I had forgotten how much of a ringer season 2 puts some of our beloved characters through. Like, there's some rough stuff with Charlie. There's lots of divisions going on with different people. Even the integration of the tail people, with the exception of, Libby and Bernard, and even like I'm very fond of Mr. Echo, but that's a frustrating dynamic, because of all the trauma that they went through and the disruption and everything. It's difficult. But the episode that we just watched was an episode called One of Them, featuring the introduction of, as we know him now, know him at this point in the show, as Henry Gale, but who is one of the most compelling characters in any TV show ever, anywhere in Ben.
Well, I'll give this Whatcha Watchin' a pass, considering its connectivity to our TV guideposts.
Mm-hmm.
It is fun to just know where Lindelof has come. By the way, I don't know if you saw this. Watchmen earned like a dozen Emmy nominations.
I did see that. Yeah, well deserved. Very nice.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. When you make me laugh, it gets me choked up too.
That ain't gonna stop. It's gonna keep going.
Okay, good. Fair warning. Consider myself warned. It's just so interesting to know, because I don't know if you did this specific thing, but I listened pretty intently to the official Lost podcast when it was airing. And,
at the time I didn't.
Kind of consumed a lot of the ancillary stuff. I didn't do any of the little side games and stuff. I mean, just more like interview type stuff.
Sure.
And it's just always fun to look at the creative genesis of the ongoing process of that show and the mercy they were at of the form and structure.
Right.
And just for good or ill. Anyway, we could spend 20 minutes sitting here, but well, good for you. I'm glad Henry Gale has made his way back into your life. I'm not rewatching Lost with you, which I'm sad about. However, my children tonight at the dinner table, my middle child is named.
Middle children.
Right. There's so many. These days, they're all just a blur. It's just like, how many of you are there?
Line up for a second so I can count you.
One of my children is named for a Lost character, the middle one, and she was kind of inquiring about that, and it just pinged for me in a real tangible way. Like, you know what? They could probably. Like reading Potter with the eldest a number of years ago, the good thing about starting something like this is it would stretch for quite a while. It's not like,
oh yeah, mm-hmm.
You might do a few in a weekend in this scenario, but the amount of content is a lot, and that pilot is so strong. I'm sure it'd be real gripping to them.
It's fantastic. Yeah, it was. It's interesting. You have a child named after a Lost character. My child is named after a Lost character.
Yeah.
So when my son heard his namesake in the show, he perked up really bad. He was like, oh, wow. And he had some playfulness. Lapidus Lackey. I know my pet's name now. Lapidus.
it again.
Lapidus Lackey.
Whoa, that was fantastic. Sometimes the jokes just make themselves. And I'm here for it. Speaking of what I'm here for is also, by the way, Riri, old Tay-Tay dropped a new album out of nowhere called Folklore. And
That's great.
Have you spun it?
Oh, yeah.
You've spun that?
I spun it.
Spun it?
They spin it, man. They spin it. They spin it.
It's great.
Yeah,
it's great.
And what's interesting, I'm not going to steal the thunder on your watch and read.
No,
but I was so
I'm used to it.
So I was so sort of enlivened by it that it did finally prompt me to go. You suggested this on a watch and read listen to, I think, a number of episodes ago, but listened to the album, really enjoyed it, responded very strongly to it. So then I watched Miss Americana. And
yeah.
Did
you enjoy that?
Strong. So yeah, very, 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 very
yeah.
good. And I didn't quite know what to expect with it, but I appreciated how it took through. There were some sort of cultural touch points that I knew, but was not an active listener to her catalog at the time the Kanye thing happened. At the time,
right.
The big backlash about her entering into politics and stuff like that. Like,
sure.
I was not an active listener to her stuff. I'm very late to the party. But no, I really think Folklore is a very, very strong album, and I love the way that each album has kind of developed this new layer of maturity. Of course, I'm saying that as I'm kind of catching up with her catalog in
sure.
the last year or two, So
well, and to be fair, like we listened pretty heavily to 1989 when it released, but I had little to no familiarity with previous stuff to that.
Mm-hmm.
Basically skipped Reputation, mainly just because it felt a little more self-serving in its aesthetic than I kind of was interested in. And Miss Americana is what opened my eyes back up to Lover. And in truth, in our home, we have we have a HomePod, the little Apple speaker thing in the kitchen. And if it's been difficult times in our home, it is almost unquestionably the command of the night is, I'm not going to say it because I don't want one of my Apple devices to respond, but the thing you say to get your Apple device to respond, that, and then it's play You Need to Calm Down by Taylor Swift. And it all just gets us all in the in the spirit. It's like, hey, you're having a tough time? Hey, blank. You need to play You Need to Calm Down by Taylor Swift. So yes, we are enjoying it. And Folklore is just great. I mean, it's getting a lot of play in our house. My wife digs it. Kids dig it. I dig it. That's
awesome.
Been another say it slow because you forgot.
What you watching? What you reading? What you listening to?
Indeed.
That's awesome. And now, ladies and gentlemen, with Folklore and Lost and Dark out of the way, we now invite you to another episode of #TV Guideposts, where this week we're unpacking one episode of HBO's The Leftovers, the episode titled 1013, which features arguably one of the most detestable characters in the entire show, but still one of the most interesting. At least to me. We'll see what Nathan has to say. But thank you for joining us for this week's TV Guideposts.
TV
Sounded like you were running on stage to meet your kid.
Hey,
please.
Fun little X-Files intersection here. I know that the show based the sudden departure on the book, which presumably in the book is October 14th, and thus,
I believe it
just
is,
by virtue of the architecture of the characterization, 1013 we know is a reference to the date of Meg's mother's passing. 1013 is also the name of Chris Carter's production company because it was the birthday
Oh,
of his kid, I believe.
interesting.
And so at the end of every X-Files episode, you'll see 1013 Productions. And so
Interesting.
kind of a little, you know,
A little
trust
wink
no one.
and a nod. Well, I mean, speaking of, so yes, this episode features the character I was referencing earlier is the old character Meg, played by Liv Tyler, who I adore in everything that she's in, but really struggle with her character in this. But before we move on, her mom is played by our old friend Dr. Fletcher from Split and Miss Collins from Carrie, Betty Buckley.
Really?
Yeah, that's her. Yeah.
Huh.
She's Dr. Fletcher from, I mean, she's in it for, 4 minutes of screen time, but yeah, that's
But
Dr.
what a
Fletcher
4
from-
minutes.
Yeah, no kidding. But yeah, Dr. Fletcher from Split and Miss Collins from Carrie. And that delighted me because I had forgotten until my second time through it that was her.
That is very interesting, Riri. I'm going to ask you a random question here, but knowing Meg's prominence here, I don't think she's the answer to this question, but I'm sorry. You made a reference, I believe, during No Room at the Inn. You praised the character of Matt Jameson, but made this coy statement that he's not your favorite character. And it's registered for me a couple of times post that conversation, wondering who that is. I don't know that your answer is going to be, that'd be interesting if it was Meg, but I'm just more curious who you would identify as your favorite character.
No, it's Kevin by a mile.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Like in terms of just like when I say favorite, like I'm sort of wrapping it all up into a package of interesting and endearing and like Kevin is
and just attractive. Listeners can't see that face you made, but that was great.
No, sincerely, like he's his arc, even the times where he makes choices that you sort of fall back on, like, oh, I wish you hadn't said that, I wish you hadn't done that. I never don't root for Kevin. Like Kevin throughout the whole run of the show, I just him as a character, I sympathize with his struggles. I want him to do well. I want things to be okay for him. And it's not that that's not true of other characters, but it's more so true. And honestly, first season, that might go towards Nora, but the series as a whole is probably Kevin.
Cool. And yeah, so that is good to know. So for 1013 is, yes, Meg centric. She appears briefly in episode 3 or 2 of this season when she accosts Tommy in Off Ramp. So I think that is 2 actually. And that's it until this episode, and then she gets a full blown installment all to herself. Yeah. And I mean, they just go the distance on committing to her character and this pretty cool backstory. I mean, whether it's things like she visited Jarden, post 1014, she visited Isaac, in this ongoing pursuit of the Sixth Sense-esque "What did my mother say?" kind of commentary. So we get that flashback. We get, basically it's just a catch up that establishes, and we can fill in some blanks here, but establishes that there is a plot afoot by her doing in and around Jarden, which is, I told you this once we started season 2, that I couldn't remember all the bits and pieces, and this is going to materialize more fully with next week's episode, but I couldn't remember all the bits and pieces of the mechanics of season 2, but I knew about and remembered strongly the don't look behind the curtain stuff, which is the Meg GR plot, and how freaking impressive of a sleight of hand that whole mechanism is. I mean,
oh my gosh, yes.
I want let's go through some beats, because I want to save the the final reveal until we get there and can more fully unpack that. But
okay, sure.
what are some specific thoughts, or cursory or profound?
So might get into a little profundity in a minute, but on the sort of more surfacey stuff, I do absolutely love the walnuts moment with Isaac, because in one of those, it's like
right, on the
at
salad.
yeah, because at the very beginning, when John takes him to task, you don't know. You haven't seen him in action. So you don't know. He could be a fraud. He could be somebody that is just completely a charlatan and no real substance to him. And so then when Meg is all like, you're not real, that's none of this. And then he busts out with that walnuts. She was very polite about it, though. Like, that's just a great moment. I love that.
Yeah.
I'll mention this, kind of pivoting out of what I love. Like, I think the scene on the bus with the children and the grenade is almost a bit too much. That is rough. That is.
It is
so difficult.
I mean, there's grenades in a backpack, and then there's grenades on a bus full of school children.
Oh my gosh, yes. Grenades on a backpack is
duds
just like,
or not.
Yeah, I mean, like, grenades on a backpack.
That's just plain old fun.
Yeah, let's see what happens here. Let's just toss these things in here and see what shakes up.
It's like the hot potato game or something.
Right. The missile in the roof from the under the shadow is like, that's like, oh, I'm about to go forth. Okay, I've got.
Yeah, I'm about to have a teeth monster.
I have thoughts. A teeth monster. And so, but no, like, that's just dreadful. Like, Meg.
Yeah.
She's awful. She's just.
Well, I couldn't remember what happened there when it happened. I was like, oh God, forgot this.
Like, why did I not remember? Did I block this out? That all these children? No, it is pretty awful. So I want to talk a bit about Meg, because it's not theme. So before we get into maybe that, do you have any sort of cursory stuff before we get up to just like sort of unpacking Meg as a whole?
Sure. Love. Everybody hear that? I love it. You probably remember this on the pod, having zero recollection of the seeds of how unintentionally right I was. Evie's pencil joke.
Yes.
How I made a call that felt GR themed, knowing where the series goes, knowing where the season goes, having zero recollection that she encountered her and told her the joke. And I was like, oh, snap.
No,
oh, snap. I'm right.
Yeah, it's almost like I watched this show before. It's so great.
No, man, it's like my intuition was correct.
That's right. That's what it is. That's what it
smart. I is kind. So that's great. Just that interaction they have. Not only does it pay off that bit, but it also plants the seed of the bigger picture that's at work fully. I'm trying to just scan real quick. I had forgotten the Tommy Laurie stuff in this, and
yeah.
The lines I'm going to give, these are cursory things, but they're going to undergird, I think, where you're kind of aiming. I love when she shows up at the revival and approaches him and just whispers, "I can do this for real." I mean, that is, it's not lost on our listeners at this point what an unabashed Lindelof fan I am, and I know he doesn't write literally every line of the works he's associated with, but he's so good. The people he assembles are so good at not just plot orchestration, but character rooted dynamics. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
There's so many. What was it? I jumped back into Defending Jacob last night, and a scene happens between two characters, and it's, again, it's still just as meh as it ever was, but we're gonna finish it because it's where we're at. And a scene happens between two characters, and I was like, that's so generic. That was the lines exchanged right there between lead characters could have been said by any character in any procedural.
Yeah, just mechanics. Sure.
Yeah, and I wasn't even thinking about it attached to Leftovers, but using that as an example of, that scene when that character approaches Tommy and says, "I can do this for real." Like, so much is conveyed
absolutely. Yes.
in those 5 words. I had to count them in those 5 words.
So much is conveyed in those
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 5 words. So love that scene, and I'll tee you up here. One, just the phrase written here is Meg is a master manipulator and has total control of everything. But the Matt and Meg scene at the end is just elevated.
Yes. So I have it in my notes. I was going to maybe, I'll use it as, unless you had more to say, I'll use that.
I've got lines of it written down, but no, I'm just popping us up to talk about that scene and then leave.
Oh my gosh. Because it focuses so much on Meg in this episode that you kind of resign yourself at a certain point that we're not going to get any contemporary engagement with what's happening. It just feels like, this is just going to be, setting up to some maybe inciting incident for the finale at the very end, but that'll be it, which we do get that. But I love so much that when she's standing in the outskirts of Jarden, and I wasn't even thinking about it. Like, I know he's out there because I've followed the season, but wasn't even thinking about like, oh yeah, like Matt is totally here. When he sees her and the history and the connection of the animosity that they've had between each other, and I just love. So Matt does an interesting thing in this season that I don't think he did in either 1 or 3, though I won't mention 3 at all, is
too late.
He totally he's tapped into the reality of people's situations in ways that I think even he himself does not quite know. Again, I'm talking about a fictional character here, but I'm thinking specifically about the earlier episode when he called Nora out for bringing Mary to the fundraiser. And he's like, that could be viewed as hostile. And she's like, why would I be hostile? And he said, why would you? Like clearly reading that, yes, she does have, he didn't know she threw a rock through their window and that she's wrestling with all these feelings, but he's picking up on that. And that having been said, in this episode, I love that he has totally got Meg's number. Now, he doesn't know what she's planning, because who does? But he's totally knows that she's up to something. And I don't know what other lines you wrote down, but I just absolutely love where he says, forgive me for being your living reminder.
Living reminder.
And it is...
Well, see, what's funny about you saying that, because I'm not at all challenging that read or that read
or this read
or that. Yes. What I was thinking was interesting about that scene is, once more, how good the show is at letting us occupy the brain space of a character and how they perceive other characters, because I think Matt comes off a little clownish in that scene. I think he is being checkmated in that scene. I think you are correct that he's maybe a little concerned. I think is actually a little strong, but I think he's maybe a little wise to, okay, there's something puzzling about you being here, but I think she gets the upper hand on him in that scene.
Oh wow, yeah, we don't quite agree on that scene, but that's fine.
I get it. Well, listeners won't know this. We planned to record this episode a while back, and so it's been a little while since I've watched this episode. So I'm just responding to the notes and the feelings, were Matt a little on his heels by that encounter.
Man, that is really interesting. So I don't, this is not what I want to discuss at length about.
Go where you want to go.
No, but all I was going to say is just so you know where my mind is at, so that it's not just an alternate reading of the film or of the scene, is the moment that pivots me away, and it's actually the moment that's sticking in my mind that's not quite letting me get there to what you're expressing, is when he says bluntly to her, I don't think you're being totally honest with me, Meg.
Sure.
And calling her out for that, and then following that call out is when he throws the line at her, forgive me for being your living reminder. I think that's an insult to her. I don't think there's any sort of like, I don't know what else to say.
I agree. Well, here's the context of that line. He's apologizing for the flyers about her mom. If you recall from listeners, if you're watching the show at home in season 1, when they have that real incendiary scene because he's made flyers about her mom, he says, he apologizes for that, and then he says, I was just doing everything I could to get you to feel. And she says, I had forgotten that. And he says, allow me to be your living reminder. There's a world, I guess all I'm saying is, I think in this particular scene, having watched it 2 weeks ago, it felt to me like he's being truly apologetic with a hint of knowingness, but that, I don't know, to me watching this episode, you get the impression Meg, I don't recall the character's last name, but this character
Abbott
is Abbott, that's right, is who she is at the point we're at is 10 moves down the line, and just is this master manipulator of these situations. And
right.
But anyway, go where you want to go.
Because we don't disagree about that, and that's a good segue. Like, even though I think Matt is more astute in that scene than maybe this part is giving him credit for, he definitely does not have a hold of like Meg's planning something awful and we need to be prepared for it. He's not tapped in on that. I think he recognizes that she's being dishonest, and I do think he starts sincerely and then pivots away from that when he realizes, oh no, she's not, she's not playing above board with me.
She's not here on honest terms. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. So here is my thesis that I'm going to present. This is the only reason I'm not saving this for like next week's episode, where we talk at length about season 2, and maybe some of it will bleed over there, is because it's not directly, I think, the theme of the show, although it might be tied more substantially to it than I'm giving it credit for. So the character of Meg interests me profoundly because I'm going to try to make a case as briefly as I can. So I'm going to hone in on a scene when she leaves Jarden. Before all of this, when she leaves Jarden and she's still engaged to her fiance and all this stuff, she spits on the ground before she leaves, right? Mm-hmm. And that moment to me indicates that everything we are about to see in the finale, we're not talking about the finale right now, but everything we're about to see in the finale is very much rooted in a personal vendetta.
Sure.
And I believe that it's meant to sort of deliver a rebuke to everything that the town represents, the safety, the we are spared, all of that. I believe that what she does is meant to administer a rebuke to that. In that sense, I feel like Meg's presence in the GR, the guilty remnant, that she is, you called her a master manipulator. I agree. I feel like she's using the guilty remnant as her agent to deliver this much more personal rebuke. In other words, I don't really consider Meg to be a member of the GR. She is nominally, and she's like the head of a faction and such. Right. But I don't consider her to be an outgrowth of the GR. I'll say it this way. She is, to me, in the show, she's an agent of chaos. To me, she's not the guilty remnant. She's the Joker. So she is using the platform.
The Leto Joker, right?
Had to ruin it, didn't you? So,
I didn't.
She's using the platform and the avenue this is my interpretation of her character.
Sure.
She's using the platform, the avenue of the guilty remnant as a means to conduct something much more personal. She doesn't believe in the guilty remnant's tenets. She doesn't buy into the cult. In my mind, she's talking willy-nilly whenever she feels like it. And we heard Patty do similar things before that, but she's also very, like her violent tendencies towards the rest of them. It just feels to me the pivot away from where she says to Tommy, like, family is everything, instead of there is no family. Like, she just strikes me as somebody who is an opportunist.
Family is everything is in the last episode, but see, that's I think I understand what you're saying, and I think it's a fair read. But I don't know if it's entirely consistent. In other words, I am with you, and it's clear by the end of this episode, so this is not a spoiler for the finale. It's clear by the end of this episode that Meg has orchestrated a massive plot to impair, kind of wreak havoc on Jarden. So that's not spoiling anything. So yes, she's gone to great lengths to make this happen, but I personally, having finished season 2 now, I don't see the entire arc of Meg as we've seen her about shaking her fist and more at Jarden, because I think that would, I'm with you. It's clear, that scene with Isaac, or the scene immediately after Isaac, carries a lot of weight for her, which is what circles her back to this. But I think it's a little asynchronous to the Meg of season 1, not personality type, but intentionality, to say it was all about getting back and effing with Jarden.
Well, no, and so that you don't misunderstand me, I'm not saying that when she showed up at the Guilty Remnant's door in season 1, I'm not saying that she had Jarden in mind then.
Sure.
What I am saying is that I think she went into it, and I think in season 1, we see her, as we see her in the backstory of this one, beginning to try to cope and beginning to try to come to something that
right.
is going to replace everything. And that's why she gets so frustrated that things are not moving along faster in season 1. That's why she gets so frustrated, and she she's pushing back a lot with Lori. And then Matt in season 1 pushes her over the edge with the whole mother stuff, right? And I think here's what's really interesting about it is I think what Matt did worked, because at that moment in season 1, when he distributes the flyers and then she just beats the fool out of him and then just abandons all of it. She keeps the only thing at that point that she's still guilty remnanting is the smoking and the wearing white. Like now she's just sort of abandoning all of that piece of things. And I feel like that is something that pivoted for her. And from that point on, she is now much more anarchistic.
But I think it's anarchistic to me this is not a dictionary thing. This is more just sort of sense, would imply zero plan, just pure, as you'd use the phrase chaos agent. Whereas I think, to me, Meg is just the distilled, evolved version of what the GR was in just edit. So in other words, and I think what's fascinating about this is this conversation is about ideology, and the GR is an ideological entity, right?
Right.
And
right.
Because if you think about it, you made a real astute observation about bottom of the well Patty, and that the signal to her of power was silence.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so by a certain token, is just silence the benchmark of the GR? No. Patty had that germ of a thing that gave her power that she now applied to the ideological stream that was happening in the GR. The GR ultimately was, in their standard practices, neutral but trolls. The GR they're religious trolls, and I mean that with every ounce of intention I can.
Sure.
Because by the same token, I mean, what they do in season 1 to that town is in its incendiariness on par with just a reduced version of what Meg is doing to Jarden, right?
See, yes, but that's the key. That's why I think she's not GR, because the GR do that to people who were victims of the departed. They're reminding people for whom somebody departed, and Meg is turning her attention.
Well, but be careful. But see, I would wonder on that. To me, it's less about it's using the forms of the departed to troll, as they do in season 1.
Mm-hmm.
I'm forming these thoughts as I'm verbalizing these as they're being established in my brain, is the same to me. It's about it's Patty in Prodigal Son Returns saying, we're just telling you it's over, right? He says, what is this about? We're telling you it's over. There's no attachments. There's no point to any of this.
Right.
The way of doing that was establishing simulacrums of departed people. The way Meg is doing this is saying, your holiest of places, we are going to desecrate to let you know there is nothing left. There's nothing to hold on to. There is no attachment. You use this phrase, family is everything. She's not validating that. She's using it. She's weaponizing it.
Right.
Anyway, my simple point is, to me, I don't read indeed and in fact, she is an evolved expression of, but I think she just took the essence of GR and morphed it and militarized it on a certain level.
And maybe we're not saying terribly dissimilar things, because I think part of the dissection would be is again, I keep coming back to the best comparison I can make is the Joker, because everybody always kept trying to find out what the Joker was about. I mean, here he is burning. I mean,
but at the same time, though, it felt like you were saying why Meg is different is there is an emotional attachment to Jarden. In other words,
I think it's personal.
But I don't think but nothing was personal with the Joker. He truly was. It's not about anything. It's about, he, on a certain level, he was GR, right? Like, you know, stop holding on to anything.
I mean, this is not a conversation about Batman, but we could unpack,
You like those here.
I do. Yeah, we do. I could unpack the, specifics in Dark Knight of him targeting, Two-Face, Harvey Dent. Like, there was calculation there.
Yes.
that was less than just, I'm going to pick random people off the street. Like, I'm not saying she's random. I am saying that she's not and that's why I say maybe we're not saying terribly dissimilar things. I feel like she's targeting Jarden because it's personal for her. And again, I go back to my best sort of evidence for this case is that the show is very intentional and it's very deliberate.
Sure.
And I don't think it's meant to be a frivolous moment that she spits on the ground before she gets on the bus. And so I do think Jarden is personal. Now, that having been said, is she sort of seizing the seeds that were there in the ideologies of the GR and then just, as you're saying, if I'm re-expressing you correctly, exploding them out to their most extreme conclusion? I don't know that I would fight that hard against that, but I think the difference for me is she is not Patty Levin unbridled. She is a very specific thing inside this, this piece of things. I think there would have been any number of other sort of outbursts and living reminder kind of demonstrations that had been happening from the guilty remnant. But this is getting into a little bit of what happens in the finale. So maybe we can return to it a little bit more substantially where we can talk about those events in detail. But that is like, when we get there, you look at what happens in that town, and it is in direct contrast to season 1, where they did their thing and then took the retaliation upon themselves.
Sure.
There is no chance, spoiler alert or spoiler hint for next, there is no chance Jarden will ever be able to retaliate in and of themselves to what the GR is being, to what Meg is about to set up to do to them. They will need external forces to retaliate. But yeah, so I mean, that's, yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's a worthwhile conversation. I think it's very interesting. And if nothing else, it once more validates what we are mutually saying, is that this is an eminently fascinating character.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes,
richly
absolutely.
drawn, expertly portrayed. I mean, Liv Tyler, goodness gracious.
Yes, absolutely.
She may physically spit in one scene, but she bites the head off of everybody she's in the scene with.
She's absolutely volcanic.
I mean, even the scene in the bar where you you as the viewer let your guard down for a minute.
It's true. Yeah.
And she just trolls us all.
Yeah, that's true.
And man, it's powerful.
So we should talk about it next week, but we cannot leave the episode, of course, without revealing the final 5 seconds of this episode. What a killer final moment that is.
It's amazing.
That's just, and it's.
I remember. I don't think I had this physical reaction, but I remember mentally the jaw drop of like, oh my gosh, I did not see that coming.
Right, and it's so baked powerful. It's so obvious.
Oh yeah,
realize it.
Oh yeah,
but
it's all over it.
Yes, but it's and what we're referring to, if you have not seen the episode, so big spoiler here, is at the end of the episode, Tommy explores this little trailer that's on the grounds near where they are, and as he opens it up, he sees Evie Murphy standing right there in front of him, and he asks who she is. She writes down on a sheet of paper, fully entrenched in the GR mindset, she writes down, "It doesn't matter." And
and Lindelof in interviews over the years talks about his style, and I remember him directly talking about the reveal of Evie and the girls in the trailer, and he talks about, because of his experience on Lost, how near impossible it is to fool the audience. And so he does not set out to fool the audience, but there are things, in other words, he learned from Lost and just watching pop culture in general in its intersection with the internet. The audience will get to your reveal before you will.
Yes, of course.
And so you have to be smart. You cannot pander. You cannot placate. And so he talks about how difficult it was to Trojan horse that in and to maintain, and that, if I remember correctly, he said, because I think this is when he was still kind of reading some stuff, but that he had seen it once or twice, but that by and large, the Evie reveal stayed pretty hush hush.
That's awesome.
In part because they're so good at stirring the pot all these other directions and have very viable options. If viable option A is second departure, well, now you spin up all your characters around that possibility, and they're pondering and the thought processes and the perspectives on if that's possible. Well, now I, as the viewer, am spun up into that conversation. Right. The other avenue is she ran away. Okay, well, is that plausible? Why would she do that? Never are you like, wait a minute, she ran away to join the GR. Like, that's a whole extra level. That's a real masterfully executed reveal there.
Yeah, it's wonderful. You want to take us out?
Once more, we close the door on Leftovers Season 2, Episode 9, as a door opened to reveal a trio of teen girls who have just said to hell with it all. Is Meg an anarchist? Is she the GR resurgent? Is she the GR evolved? Can we ever know? Next week, join us as we have a full episode dissecting Episode 10 of Leftovers Season 2 here at the Fear of God. That was good, Reed. I like that conversation.
That was a very invigorating conversation. So this is a landmark, I believe. I would need to listen back to it to know for certain. But I believe this is a bigger landmark episode than we might realize. Again, I would need to listen to it back to realize. But I think now, with the conversation we're about to have, we started this show almost 4 years ago.
Yes.
In August of 2016, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in that pilot episode, we rattled off a whole bunch of films that we'd seen, that we'd liked, that we'd whatever. And I believe, with the exception of the non-horror themed references that we made, like Pee-wee's Big Adventure and stuff like that, that with the exception of those, I think the others, which is our discussion on the table today, is the last one of those mentioned in that pilot that we have not done a full episode about.
Interesting.
So I think.
Can I tell a funny Pee-wee joke real quick?
Oh, I'm always down for those.
Yes, me too. When you beat me to it. No. Recently, or for Father's Day, actually, my wife bought me a bicycle, and I've really enjoyed that because I can't really go to the gym anymore, and that kind of in full transparency amongst friends, stopped more or less anyway, but wanted some form of exercise. She was able to find me a bike. By the way, those are incredibly hard to find right now if you didn't know that. She was able to pull that off. And after like a day, after a couple of rides, I'd taken some pictures of myself and the girls, and I posted to Instagram, and I was like, yay, wife got me a new bike for Father's Day, and check this out. And by the way, if you flip to the end, you'll see a cool trick I learned. And I just took a screen grab from Pee-wee's Big Adventure of him on the bike. So if you're scrolling and you're like, oh,
yeah, God, that's awesome.
That was a lot of fun.
So
anyway, back to what you were saying.
No, that's okay. My family and we showed our son Pee-wee's Big Adventure for the first time during the quarantine and everything, and he loved it. It's great. It's so, I had forgotten how line for line hysterical that movie is. I knew it.
Great.
Yes, and I knew it was funny, but I had forgotten that no. Literally every
Mr.
other
Herman.
line.
Mr. Herman, you have a call at the front desk. I actually thought about posting the actor who plays PW in the movie within the movie. He's got a beard, dark hair. I thought about posting a picture of that as me.
So awesome. Oh, it's so great.
Action-packed Pee-wee.
So yes, we are not here. I know. We should do a B-side of Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I'll invite my son on. That'd be fun. So yes, this.
So what
now,
what do you mean when you say this is the last one? Like, we just happen to name some movies that we might like to cover, and this is one of them, and this is the last to get to?
No. So what's interesting is in the pilot, if you listen to the pilot of our show,
I try not to.
Well, it's fun. But
we've come so far.
In the pilot of our show, we just rattled off a bunch of things, films we liked, films we responded to, films we'd seen, whatever, any of that like that. And coincidentally, I remember in one of the very few times I've gone back to listen to it, I remember just making a note of like, okay, we've covered The Exorcist now. Oh, we've covered Psycho. Oh, we've covered The Orphanage. So I was just jotting down like all of these films that we mentioned in that. And the one glaring omission was, we haven't covered the others yet, because we do talk very briefly about the others. And so this, I think, marks actually every film, and again, I need to go back to it to make doubly sure, but I believe every film mentioned in the pilot, we have now a full episode of conversation about, which is, I think that's a little cool. But
very, very specific landmark.
It is. Not many people have it. So you and I saw the others together.
Did we?
We did.
That makes me smile.
Yeah. Now, I do not believe that it was your first time seeing it. I think you had seen it, knew my affection for horror films, and was like, we got to go see the others. Now, some of the details are a little fuzzy. I just remember we saw it in the theater together, because I distinctly remember having a conversation about it coming out of the theater, like on our way back to our car, and just sort of dissecting the film a little bit.
Dissecting what scared us to find out what saved us. That's what we did 20 years ago.
Yeah, all of those years ago. So this actually would have been, that's funny, because this actually would have been like in the early days. We would have been friends but we would have been friends for like maybe a year at that point, maybe 2. But so then I have not seen this film since the theater. So this was only my second time seeing it. So I was really, really curious to go into it, because I'll lead with this, and then you're welcome to share your thoughts. I don't really care for the others. And this Even still. Huh. There are things that I respect greatly about it, appreciate about it. If we do the conversation this way and do our normal sort of formatting, I think some of the scares are among some of the most iconic from horror films in the last 2 decades. But yeah, I don't really care for the others, and I know why. And some of it's kind of just my personal proclivities and personal attachments and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm not a very big fan of the others. Now, that's not meant to set up if we're in terribly disparate places. But I am curious to know, like, I think you had said at some point, maybe either on pod or you and I were talking off pod, that you had seen the others, I think, multiple times. Like, how many times, if you know?
Well, I mean, there was a little run around its release. Clearly, I watched it at least twice in the theater.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember owning it on DVD. I don't do that anymore, really.
Wow.
Yeah, that was his signature of appreciation.
Back in the day.
Way back when. Remember when we had our apartment broken into and they stole all our DVDs, and that's the
Oh,
only
my
reason we discovered that we'd been broken into?
So mad.
We ignorant.
The window was broken. Our pizza from the freezer was gone. Our laptops were strewn
Credit
all
card
over the
machine is
bed.
broken.
Our laptops were strewn all over the bed. Everything.
No, that was gone too.
But what clued us in
Was
the DVDs were gone.
I'll occasionally tell that story, and my wife's like, "You are so dumb. You are so dumb." because yes, listeners, Reed and I shared an apartment with a third roommate way back in the day, and we came home from an outing to our little apartment in Bowling Springs. Actually, it was in Shelby, North Carolina, and didn't notice the back window of the back door was broken.
Oh.
I mean, I guess we weren't in the mood for Totino's at the moment, so didn't happen to check the freezer for frozen pizza. Our burgled our frozen pizza.
They
did, man. They took pizza
man.
and DVDs. That's how you know you stumbled into a college apartment. You're like, okay, this is all I'm gonna find here, so I better take it and go. But yeah, I remember looking over to the little wooden bookshelf we had.
Yeah,
it was like one of those half heights. And I remember, I don't know if you recall this. I remember thinking, wow, did third roommate, because he had a habit of just checking DVDs out of the little bookcase. I was like, man, did he go take all of them into his room? And is
he like sitting on them? What is he doing?
I mean, literally, it is not too beyond the scope of what actually happened to say we basically sat in our apartment for 30 minutes before starting to put pieces together of like,
yes,
wait a minute, I think someone else may have been in here.
So funny. We're looking around at each other like, did you do that? Did you do that? Like, where's out my pizzas?
Meanwhile, we're throwing shade at each other mentally. Like, why did Reed have to go eat all those pizzas?
We're like, why did he have to
take
steal
all them DVDs? Yeah, all he had to do was ask. We are like the dumb three bears. The three bears come home. It's like Goldilocks been here. We're like, dum-da-dum. Good night.
Like, this porch seems fine.
Wait a minute. Why did I step on glass? I'm sure it's just normal.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, you asked me about the others.
Yes.
As a horror movie at the time, I loved it at the time. I know and have at least inkling of where you might be headed, which isn't a disparaging statement. It's simply to say, I've got a little more mixed feelings about it these days for its content and possible theme, but not for its effectiveness. I think even rewatching it, I was like, I mean, this is an excellently crafted film. Sure.
And I would even, yes. And in that regard, I would not only agree, I would say it's a film that I do respect. Yeah. And it's a film that I think, like I said, particularly some of the effectiveness of its frights are among some of the best I've seen in films in the last 2 decades.
This is just coming to me. I'm sorry to cut you off there. This is just coming to me because what is weird about the others, there's two thoughts here. One is there's nothing. Well, that's not entirely true. I was about to say there's nothing fun about it, but the kids, there's some true comedic elements to it.
Especially with the son. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think where I'm going is it's never going to be one that you just are like, hey, new person, watch this movie. See, I don't know. I'm sussing out some of these feelings clearly in real time.
Yeah.
I think some of the thematic stuff that I imagine we'll get to is enough that it's cautionary on just the casual viewer, especially of our kind.
Yes.
And I think what's unfortunate about it, this was the effect I was having, or this was the effect it was having on this most recent rewatch, and then we can move into specifics, is as opposed to The Sixth Sense, the paradigm shift in this, it's all built on that.
Yes.
And so, so from a suspense standpoint, once you know, there, other than just effective film craft, there's not a whole lot else to sink your teeth into.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, yes. And I'll So let's go ahead and go into the the premise of this. So the premise of this is this. I'm going to express the premise. Then I have a couple of little trivia bits. So the premise of this is there's a woman. Her husband is off to war. Nicole Kidman and her children suffer from a very unique, unique condition that is they're sensitive to light. They're hypersensitive to light. And so if the light
fatally so,
yes, that if the light breaks in, they're actually going to have such a severe reaction to it, they could begin to hyperventilate and actually die. And so she has to be very mechanical and deliberate when she moves through this house. Well, the inciting incident of the film is that these servants sort of appear on the doorstep, and she thinks they've been sent by this agency. The servants are then hired and taken through the house, and there quickly begins to be this undercurrent that there's a spectral presence in the house. And so they keep hearing, noises of people who aren't there. And so you as the viewer are realizing like, oh my gosh, there are ghosts in this house. And then I think it's okay at this point to major spoiler warning and just and go ahead and just pull the Band-Aid off the premise itself. The major reveal towards the end of the film is actually that Nicole Kidman and her two children are the deceased ones, as are the servants. And they are the ghosts in the house. And who they were hearing is actually the living who have assumed ownership of the house and have been trying to sort of communicate with the ghosts through a medium and through these different avenues.
Even hearing you describe it, this is an excellent premise.
Yes. Oh, it absolutely is. No, it absolutely is. And that's why I'm so torn when I get to, and we'll have this conversation in this episode, but that's why I get so torn when we talked about identity, and we talked about how identity is this pulpy, flashy kind of it's not asking you to think too hard. It's a story that is intended to be entertaining, built on a gimmick. To me, The Others is kind of fundamentally built on a similar gimmick that is, as you've already expressed, like it's a great premise. That's a wonderful reveal, but there is so much, and I don't think I'm hypersensitive to this. I really was trying to be objective and trying to sort of get out of my own head. There is so much, I'm going to use this word very deliberately, preachiness in the layers of the film about certain ideological things that don't have anything to do with its premise, that really I struggle with. And I don't even struggle with it because it's essentially propping up some agnostic and atheistic views. I'm not opposed to that in my storytelling. There's tons of films that are really, enthralling, that have those kind of, I freaking was galvanized by Hereditary, and that's definitely got some anti-religious sentiment to it. I think it's the way it goes about it for me, because it is not really rooted back in the substance of the premise. And maybe we'll get to a place by the end of this conversation where I feel differently about that. But in the viewing of it, I struggled with that.
Let me figure out how to word this correctly. It takes more work to build a case that it's not anti-religious than it does to recognize, I think it might be anti-religious. I can sort of get behind that. And honestly, I think that was because there's part of me that can just plug in on the ghost story aspect of it. The performances are great, the aesthetic. I mean, again, it is, I do find great in watching it, which is an interesting way to phrase this, versus enjoyment. Like in watching it, I can find a lot to appreciate.
Sure.
But I can also recognize, it, to your point, it is working very hard to sandbag the door of its premise, of its idea.
No, absolutely.
And to the point, and this can pivot us into some bits real quick, if that's okay.
Yeah.
The note I read was Amenabar based a lot of the script on his Catholic school education, and literally the next note says he's now agnostic. It's like, it's true. Spoiler alert, Paradigm shift.
And it's funny because when we walked out of the theater, I remember that is what we were at least partially discussing. And I remember trying so hard in the anti-religious aspect that I
Sure,
had picked up on. And I remember you weren't challenging me on that. You were just kind of, you found it interesting that I walked away with that takeaway. And I remember sitting there trying very, very hard not to come off as a prude, because I was like, I don't remember the exact dialogue we had, but I remember feeling in that conversation like, I really don't want you, my friend of at that time, around 2 years, I didn't want you to think that I wasn't mature enough in either my own beliefs or in my understanding of artistic sensibilities to not hold intention that like, oh, well, you can't make a film that says religious is BS. Like, no, I watch many, many films and love many of them that deal with some very challenging and confrontational aspects of religious thought.
Well, and to be fair to you, it's not that I was that progressive then and high and mighty. It was more just, and I say this sincerely, generally speaking, I receive out of a feeling orientation, you receive out of an analytical orientation,
which is true.
Sort of.
Yes.
And so to you saw the text and were like, huh. To me, I was like, oh, that was kind of spooky,
This is what it is. We're walking back to the car, and as we're walking back to the car, I'm like, the more I dissect the specific line items, and you're like, that made me pee my pants.
Like, but I am your daughter,
You're like, wasn't that spooky? Oh, man, Reed.
Oh, Reed, man, you're just a wet blanket.
I just tried to have a fun time at the movies, and here you are talking about all this religion.
Let's go back to the picture show.
That was a very earnest way that you just did that. Oh, I love you for it. So,
but no, I actually think that's probably what happened. Was
sure.
You were more astute. I was more intuition, right?
And there is a version of this film that, if you can sort of unplug, which I honestly tried to do this time around and couldn't quite effectively do it. If you can unplug from that element of it, there's a lot of effectiveness to the film. The aesthetic is great. Let's get into a couple more of these trivia bits.
Throwing at you real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm only doing that rudely because I want to give this note, because in the movie, watching it, I was like, did they make up this condition? This seems like
That's funny.
Very Hollywood thing to do. Oh, guess what? The kids are so sensitive. They're going to like spontaneously combust. But
they go pop like a...
It's like at the end of Ready or Not. It's just boop. just brimstone and dust. But the disease the children have is an actual disease known as xeroderma pigmentosum, which sounds like a Harry Potter incantation.
Doesn't it sound made up? It's so real, but it sounds so made up.
Pigmentosum, not pigmentosum. Which is basically an extreme sensitivity to sunlight, is very rare, with roughly 1,000 people in the world that have it.
Yeah, absolutely. The only other thing that I had that I think is substantial is so Nicole Kidman was just coming off of a film I know you love, Moulin Rouge.
I do.
And she was reluctant. She was reluctant to do this project because of its darker themes. And she claimed in interviews, you can debate about whether that was to hype promotion for the film or whatever, that preparing for the role gave her nightmares. It is also interesting for me to note that it was executive produced by Tom Cruise, who was Kidman's husband at the time. Their romance was pretty noteworthy and popular. They were like a big Hollywood power couple. And it would ultimately be their final project together in any capacity before their divorce. What's interesting to me...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just...
You may be about to say what I was going to say.
Well, what's interesting, too, is that concurrently, Cruise was working on Vanilla Sky, and Vanilla Sky... Yeah, I'm not that fond of it either. Vanilla Sky was a remake of Alejandro Amenabar's film Open Your Eyes, and would release just a few months after the others. So there's a lot of little connections there. But anyway,
Those little early aughts Hollywood connections. Yeah. No, I was actually going to say the note I read is that she did actually quit during rehearsals.
Yes. No, I had read that. Yeah.
No, you didn't say it.
I didn't say it.
Only other note I have that I thought you'd enjoy is the name of the gardener, Mr. Tuttle, is the same as the gardener in The Changeling.
Oh, yeah, I do like that.
I
It
figured
makes
you-
me happy. Yeah, makes me happy.
I was at a home recently, and I was talking to this guy who clearly wasn't quite that interested in the wares. I was there to hawk to him.
Okay.
I just talk about what I do.
Get out of
like
here
I'm
with
a-
your hawking wares.
Hey, sir, I'm just trying to hawk my wares to you. And he's like, I don't have any of that.
We don't do that here.
Yeah,
we
yeah,
don't cotton to your kind.
Anyway, the podcast came up, and he was like, "Oh, I love The Shining," and I think he dabbled in the illicit substances while he watched The Shining, according to his story. But he was like, "Have you heard of? A lot of people have heard of The Changeling," and I was like, "Well, as a matter of fact, didn't care for it."
And he's like, "You take your window."
Yeah. I'm gonna throw your wares out and stay out of the Woolworth.
I'm gonna hawk you off my front porch. So yeah,
likes, dislikes. Do you want to?
yeah. So my very very first one, although I know you would probably had this on yours, so you can chime in. There are two characters that was a really nice surprise to see. I'm going to mention the one that you're probably not going to name. It was delightful to see Mrs. Mills, old Eloise Hawking, who at the time I would not have known who that was because Lost hadn't even aired yet. And so the actress is Fionnuala Flanagan. I don't know how. I know how to say the last name. Thank you, but I don't know how to say the first name. But
I just enjoy watching you try.
And then who's the other big surprise in this movie that we wouldn't have remembered?
Well, let's be in it then. It's old Matt Jameson himself, Chris Eccleston.
Right.
That handsome devil came wandering out of the fog, and I was like, what?
Others.
He's so young and strapping.
He is.
It is primarily like he is quite young there. I mean, not like child young or teenager young, but probably mid-20s or so young. And it is his voice that is the major tell, because at first
voice.
we watching Leftovers, I was like, is that Matt? And then he did that. Kevin? No, that's not Matt. I've been in that fog so long. My credit got good.
Make you wait, fog. We ain't got call waiting. We got y'all waiting.
Fionnuala Flanagan and Christopher of the House of Eccleston. I did write that this is a perfect movie for Shelter in Place. You got in quarantine. You got the mother, poor mom, shut up in her house with her kids. Like, no wonder they crazy. No wonder they lost it. Like, we got to sit here in our house all this time.
Sure.
Yeah. So I did think it was an ironically timely movie.
Absolutely.
We sang the praises of Liv Tyler a few minutes ago. Nicole Kidman in this movie is phenomenal. Like,
yeah, she's outstanding.
As much of a hang up as I might concede about the sensibilities, the thematic content.
Sure.
She is almost worth the price of the film. Like,
oh yeah, and she carries it too.
Yeah,
like the spooky aesthetic helps tremendously, but performance and character wise, like she and that's not to take anything away from like Mrs. Mills, who's in many scenes with her and holds her own. But yeah, Nicole Kidman
still
is just
support. I mean,
exactly. No, absolutely.
You miscast Grace and you don't have a film.
That's it. Right. Exactly. Yeah, she's stunning in this film. She's amazing.
The kids are great.
Yeah.
Cowdy custard, fibber. Doves are anything but holy. They poo on our windows.
He pooped on. So yes,
16 years of marriage, never asked me to poop on him.
Oh my gosh, the best moment.
You did it. I didn't do it.
It's a good point. Okay, so
did you also catch what? Here's another casting bit. Because I don't know if you're steering towards.
I am.
Catelyn Stark. Catelyn Stark, Queen of the North for like a split second.
For real?
Yeah, she's the mom of Victor at the end.
Oh wow, that is right.
I know.
So here's what's funny is that
What's funny?
So what's funny is I registered that I knew her from something, and you know that moment where you're sitting there like, where do I know that face from? Because she's significantly younger in this,
Right.
and so I was like, where do I know that face from? But I didn't do the research to find it. Ooh,
See,
no.
that thought pinged me, and I did the work.
Oh, good. Yeah. See, I'm lazy. I didn't
Right.
do that. No, I
That's,
didn't do that.
we wouldn't have made it to 4 years if it was just on you.
So I do have some notes in scares because the things that I do like about this film are in scares. I don't like much else other than Kidman, the general aesthetic. I do think the kids are fun, and it's fun to see those couple of characters. But the things that I like about the movie are its frights. So obviously, the first big one that I wrote down is Victor in the room. Like that's the
when
first.
He touches his cheek.
Yes,
Ooh.
that's the first one that I was like, oh gosh, that's
that ain't right.
That ain't right. That ain't right.
But bad.
But just in general, the intruder moments, because that's what they call them before we realize what they really are. They call them intruders, and that every scene that sort of revolves around these mysterious intruders is really, really effective.
No kidding. While I was watching this,
I
think my wife may have been out. My 3-year-old, who getting her to bed at night these days is a bit of a challenge. Getting her to stay in her bed and get to sleep is a little bit of a challenge. Was running around above my head.
Oh, no. That's great. That's great. That's like my son walking out in the room on me while I'm watching The Orphanage. I was like, oh,
with a burlap sack on his head. You're like, what are you doing?
Where did you get that? Oh my God. We didn't buy that for you.
3, knock on the door.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I love it. Is now I will praise almost every choice in designing the film because in part it is also fun if you know the end to use your imagination during the film of these the you called them the new occupants or residents or whatever, like the people who are trying to live in the house, like
the intruders.
It's kind of cool to just kind of think about that every now and then as you're watching it, and because it is a really it's a really well executed conceit.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And so obviously, like, I'm gonna save the best scare for last, and even let you name it if you want to name it. So I'm gonna skip to the reveal that the servants are really the ghosts is like a really great twist when you see their picture, the picture of the dead. You know, that's a really great twist, and sort of raises the stakes on the threat to Kidman and her children. It's not one that's completely surprising because you kind of picked up on before you realize that Kidman and her children are dead too. You kind of would, first time viewing, you might still pick up on the fact that there's something odd about these servants and that maybe the servants are really the ghosts or whatever. So that part was really cool, but I don't know if you would cite the same one, but I think a case could be made for among the top 10, if not top 10, top 20 creepiest,
are you mad?
Yes,
I am your daughter.
One of the most unsettling.
Woo!
And for all that I would take this film to task for, and for all that I might not recommend the film for, that moment is a work of genius. That entire sort of sequence of her coming in, seeing an old lady in the dress that she had previously just put her daughter in, and the whole, she's talking in a child's voice and says, "Are you mad? I am your daughter," and everything about that. It is just
and
a moment of genius.
If you end up not watching the film, the living are performing a seance.
Yes.
The medium is now occupying the body, the corporeal space of the daughter,
right?
And so Kidman comes back in to check on her. She's playing with this marionette, and so you've got this old lady hand sticking out from under this, and she's
oh my Lord.
Kidman's like, "What have you done with my daughter? Are you mad?" But the brilliance of the shot is you can see the face under it, and all they've done is taken the young actor's voice and dubbed over the old lady, but it is an old woman. There's no CG, there's no nothing, but it's just this old woman with this kind of puppet head kind of aesthetic going on, and it is harrowing. Yeah,
it's very, very effective. And
now I will say I agree with you that is probably the scare highlight of the film. I will say, Ray, that painting of that pilgrim dude, that ain't right.
Yeah, before the light turned on. Oh my God.
Yeah.
No.
I think the whole furniture, the sheeted furniture room scene
that's creepy. No, that's very, very creepy. Yeah. Yeah.
And then just the last one, but again, lesser than the ones we've been talking about. The music room, the piano room.
Oh,
kind of encounter she has is really, because again, I think the strength of the scare factor of this film is its practical effect. There's really, I have no clue what the state of CG was in 2000, although this is, they could have thrown Jar Jar in there or something for all I knew, but is you so mad? Lisa, I'm your daughter. Like Jar Jar Binks, paranormal investigator. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Now I'm just picturing Jar Jar Binks retroactively through all of these different films that we've got.
I'm not a racial stereotype at all.
My gosh.
You wanna dive in the deeps?
Let's do it. So I want to, we've already sort of scratched up on the surface of my major problem with the film. I want to unpack it for just a brief moment. I don't want to beat up on it, but I do not respond positively either in films that affirm what you would call my worldview or films that challenge it. I do not respond very positively to films that tritely treat the ideas as if they are ridiculous ideas and that the filmmaker and storyteller is smarter than they are. Like, my best example of a film that I love, and we've done a whole episode about it, so I'm not going to just go back and listen to our episode on The Wicker Man. I love the way The Wicker Man...
We know you love The Wicker Man.
I do. Dancing around the maple! Oh! So, that's really funny because I ain't even like that. But the way The Wicker Man wrestles with religious ideas, both pagan and Christian, is so dripping with seriousness. And I don't mean hyper seriousness as if it takes itself too seriously. I mean, it treats them with respect. It presents the pagan ideas in the film with respect. And of course, it doesn't hurt that Christopher Lee, this just regal actor, is the one expressing them. And then you got Edward Woodward, who's no slouch himself.
Did you just say Edward Woodward?
Edward Woodward, I did. So that's a film that treats the ideas seriously. I'm not going to throw Alejandro Amenabar onto the same shelf as this individual, but one of my biggest things that I just cannot stand about the films wrestling with religious ideas of like Seth Rogen is because they just are saturated with the sensibility that he's smarter than all the idiotic people who believe this stuff. And it does not even attempt to understand why someone might take ideas like that seriously, as opposed to something like The Wicker Man, which presumes that everybody who believes it has arrived at this belief with substance and with personal history, right, and then extends the character dynamics accordingly, right? The thing that I don't like about the anti-religiosity of the others is not that I'm offended that it's anti-religious. Again, I'm not. It's that it is so apparent in every scene that it's not even interested in the ideas. It just thinks the ideas are ridiculous, so it's going to present them. There is no moment in any of the Bible lesson scenes or the random dialogue that they're having with Miss Mills about these very specific elements of their religious instruction. They're going to
children's limbo.
And it's like there's And I get it that some people might find some of those doctrines and ideologies, ridiculous, and they might think they're absurd. But I don't respond very well to the fact that the film treats them as absurd. And then the button it ties on it is at the end when Nicole Kidman realizes she's a ghost. And then they sort of ask her about like belief and everything. And then she's like, well, clearly I didn't understand one thing I was talking about. That's not her line, but like,
yeah.
She
That would have been a
expresses-
very modern American way to deliver that.
He looks at the cameras like,
Kids, meh. It's like the Elmo. They just superimpose the Elmo gif on top of her.
yeah,
The end.
It almost as well, like Nicole Kidman's a very strong actor, but it is almost like that's the line. Like she says, like, I didn't understand anything. Clearly I didn't know anything. And that's like the resolution that it gives us. And so that's the part of it that I find so frustrating in trying to sort of take the ideas seriously is I
Right.
don't feel like the film takes them seriously.
Well, you've got some good comps on the table of Wicker Man. I don't remember beyond Sausage Party, the Rogan stuff. What else might you be
Paul.
referring to?
Which I actually don't think
Is that
Paul
the-
was Seth Rogen, but I think he voiced the
Oh, the
alien
alien?
in
That's-
Paul, and and it's
It's got
some
religious undertones or
very
overtones?
very cheap anti-religious sentiment because Kristen Wiig's character is like a hyper-religious person who at the end completely converts to this was all BS and all
Right.
that kind of stuff. And so yeah,
Well, I'll affirm your take on Wicker Man, even though it's not like a favorite of mine. What Wicker Man does is posits equal forces. And I'm not
Yes.
arguing in the real world good and evil are equal forces. That's not what I'm saying.
No,
I'm saying
no.
in the context of the film, it's saying these are two ideologies that the characters in these films take seriously. It's almost a what if good doesn't win? You know what I mean? Like, and that's
Right.
kind of an
Yes.
interesting conversation.
it is.
Whereas I'm going to use an argumentative phrasing here that I don't know if I'm totally know what I'm saying. It feels like what Amenabar does is to set up a straw man, right? Like
yes,
he
I agree.
basically just says, let me build up this thing with the intention of knocking it down.
Yes.
Which yeah, is kind of an unfair take, kind of an unfair treatment. I mean, well, let me throw, I'm always conscientious, or want to be conscientious at least. I don't know that I always am. I don't want you to feel short shrift on the ideas you presented. I'm wondering if the theme that kind of jumped out at me this go round won't redeem the film for you, but
No,
I wonder if it will elevate the conversation at least.
Sure. Absolutely.
Because something that I found real interesting, and this is from, you cited the release of this film as, at the 20 years ago mark. And I mean, my personal journey of faith, if you will, has so evolved in that time frame. And what I found interesting, I'll phrase it that way. What I found interesting watching it this time wasn't, oh man, poor Grace, what a dummy. But it was, what do we do? And how do we respond in the real? So this is kind of, I guess, if it were my question for this conversation, how do we respond in the real when the worldview we've constructed won't hold reality, or
yeah, sure.
can't stand up to new information?
Sure. Yeah.
And so I would wonder if we could hang out there a little bit, because I think that
Absolutely.
was an interesting takeaway this time, because what I would agree, and maybe this is fast forwarding here. I do think part of me would, if someone's a horror fan and likes the general material, I think this is worth watching with maybe some caveats there. If only because I think it's so effective beyond its text.
Yeah, I agree.
That said, what is hard is it is so, as you've described, laden with one talking point. And so I find it interesting. Like, I don't, Amenabar may be saying Christianity is stupid and you're stupid if you believe in it.
Right.
Me watching the movie is, okay. It reminds me of The Witch, with how rigid forms intended to be airtight never will hold. And I think what's fascinating about that point is, and why it's easy for me to be, you're not doing this, it's easy for me to process the others, is because I can say, well, that's not God. That's not, it is unfortunate and sort of small-minded if, and I'm assigning, that's a loaded phrase, and maybe assigning too much ill intent on Amenabar's part, but taken purely on the text of the assessment you've made of the film, which I think is there, it's small-minded in its approach. In much the ways I would say in these days. I'm like, well, I'm not intending to get incendiary here or controversial, but in this conversation of rigid form that won't hold to new data, for me personally, the personal journey I've been on, that had a pretty calamitous experience of organizational religion a number of years ago. I'll quit beating around the bush here, but the church we attended was very resistant to LGBTQ friendliness. And because of history and because of association, familiarity, affection for that body, I kind of cowed to that. Like, even though there were explicit times, and because of personal associations, I always felt a little uncertain about that.
Yeah, of course.
About that choice. And so when we ultimately left that body, an intentional choice was made that whatever we sought next was going to be inclusive and gay friendly. And so that, think what you will about that, not you, but listener, think what you will about that. No, all I'm trying to say is, it's not patting myself on the back. It was great calamity bred need for bigger faith.
Sure.
And I think so few of us are, and you see it everywhere, so many people's cups are so small.
Yes. No doubt about it.
And I think that's the sadness I feel for the Grace character. Again, the movie does pass judgment on her. The movie passes judgment on her ideology, which is unfortunate. But the empathy I can generate for her is rooted in, this is so rigid and so not fruitful and abundant in a way that may sound easy and glib. I don't mean it to be that. I'm simply saying, if you can't allow room for your own person to evolve and your own sort of perspective to widen, you will have happen to you what happened to Grace, which is it's so rigid. I can't incorporate new data. For me personally, it was, I have come to a place, it's no surprise to listeners, but through reading, through experience of full permissive inclusion with no strings attached to LGBTQ people in the life of faith. So for me, that was not a fly in the ointment. That's an embrace. That's a widening of the cup or of the table, to use that metaphor, to permit what I felt like the Lord was permitting me to permit. That's a weird way of saying that. Biggest takeaway or point to be made here that I'd welcome some feedback on is simply, what do we do when the worldview which, though having echoes and symbols, symbol,
Mm-hmm.
of faith architecture and faith language, and read, this is rampant. What do we do
Oh, yeah.
when the ground you've built on is shifting sand? This is what happens.
Nope, yes. And I will say that, the value that can be gleaned from an exercise like this is you just brought up The Witch. I'm going to try to say three things in quick succession, because The Witch is another film. I love The Witch.
Yeah.
I've watched it since we covered it.
Does my comparison make sense?
Oh, completely.
Okay, yeah.
And The Witch is a film that I've rewatched since we covered it, just for, because I find it very fascinating and find it very, I don't know if entertaining is the right word, but it's
I get it.
Provocative and compelling. And I do think what's interesting about the film is
the film The Others, or the film The Witch?
The film The Others, is that it, and I'm going to get back to the question you posed in just a second, it, I feel, absolves Grace as a character and only condemns her ideology. And the reason I say it absolves her is because Mrs. Mills is very tender to her at the end. Let me make you a cup of tea, and they're gonna be in the house, and that's it. So it kind of affirms her as a character now that she's gotten rid of that ridiculous ideology.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I think you've identified that is not only an elevated conversation point, but also a legitimately quite helpful one to really sort of unpack and explore, which is what we aim for on the show, even when we don't really respond positively to the material. And I do think your use of the language is so spot on, of when the foundation you've built your house on is shifting sand, and now calamity has befallen, and the foundation is just slipping out from underneath you. And there is that cautionary element to The Others that I think is, I do think it's genuinely valuable to challenge your own sort of, and I've grown to be a bit uncomfortable with the word worldview, because I feel like, this is an odd way to say this, because worldview by definition is like an expansive sort of thing. But I feel like the use of it is really reductive. I don't know why I cringe a little bit at the word
framework.
Worldview. Yeah. And I'm not taking you to task for using that word. I'm just saying, like, there are people, because I used it earlier as well. I think there are people who they do the reason it's kind of appropriate is the way they view the world, literally, like the way they see what's happening, and how that can be so insulated and isolated and compartmentalized. And I think what keeps me from really embracing The Others as a film, and in the way it explores that, is simply the fact that I feel like it doesn't lead me to that. It starts from that premise and then just shows me why it believes that way. Whereas a film like The Witch, or even like The Wicker Man, sort of leads from, Wicker Man being like, what happens when two worldviews diametrically opposed to each other collide? The Witch is, what happens when that level of rigidity is confronted with forces beyond its control, and the center doesn't hold, and it starts to slip away from it. And so
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Just my only other statement is I do think the elevated element of the conversation is we do see an absurd amount of people right now who are so stubbornly opposed to acknowledging the flaws in their own perspective, or the possibility that there could be a flaw to their perspective. And in that sense, yes, I do think, a very sort of, and it's ironic that her name is Grace, and maybe not ironic, maybe very intentional. And that the other piece, before I pivot it back over to you, that I just don't want to lose that, is that what happens at the end, they are quite literally letting the light in. They've been living in darkness.
Sure. Right.
They've been living in self-imposed darkness because the light is pain. And then when they realize, like, oh no, the light is not hurting me. And I would posit that to a filmmaker like Amenabar, the light to him is rational thinking,
Yeah.
clear-mindedness, getting out of superstitious ways of thinking, which is probably
Well, because she even says, how could people be so superstitious when she finds the death photos?
Yes, exactly. And so clearly there is an element.
You
to
almost
it.
expect Nicole Kidman to look up and go, ah, just wink at the screen.
How could they be so superstitious? And then he doesn't do, thankfully, he doesn't do the thing that like Shyamalan in Sixth Sense does and goes back and shows you all of the moments that you should have
Look how
realized.
superstitious you've been, Grace. Message.
That moment can only happen after 2 decades of friendship. That's it.
Well, I want to. I'm sorry. Were you done, or do you?
No, I'm done.
With the thought? Okay.
No,
well, I'm not shifting away. I'm taking what you're laying down and molding it. I'm making moldy hand gestures here.
Don't ever do that.
Not moldy hands, like your hands have mold on them, but whatever. It's like Ghost. It's like the movie Ghost. So many references this episode. I love it.
It's so great.
Because what's interesting about it, I would put the others more in the camp with Mother
Mother.
than I would with The Witch or Wicker Man.
I don't disagree with that at all.
Because it never blinks from where it wants you to land.
Correct. That's absolutely right.
And how that would happen, I think, in the others, because I was pondering this while you're chatting, is Ms. Mills never offers, how do I say this? Never offers a competing ideology.
Correct.
A complementary ideology, something new to the mix. She's just waiting for Grace literally to understand the situation, but also metaphorically to set aside the superstition.
Correct.
Whereas I think something that happens in The Witch that makes it so strong is not only does the film affirm the ideology, Black Phillip,
yes,
but it does offer challenges to the father's views.
Yes, it does.
I mean, I don't remember the son's name, but the vision he has on in his death throes, I mean, that is powerful.
No, absolutely.
And does more to make a more robust conversation within the film itself than the others ever even attempts.
Absolutely.
And I think, my cynical self would be happy to beat up on this stuff for a while, but it is difficult, as you put it, to sort of, in your comings and goings, like, so it's just fascinating. Like, I feel like what I try to do is offer complementary conversation.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Whereas so many people are happy to be Grace. And I worry that, that's not it's not sustainable. It's not tenable. I remember, I haven't listened to it in quite a while, but the Bible for Normal People podcast, they did, and it was actually really tenderly done, even though it was meant as critique. Another organization, much more traditional, I don't mean this as an incendiary word, but fundamentalist type of organization, had written a piece about 2 years ago, published a piece on their website that effectively was like, why, if you're progressive, you're about to be an atheist. Actually wasn't too far from the title. And just super reductive stuff you'd read, knowing you, and just be like, oh, just flimsy argumentation.
Sure.
Poorly intended, I mean, anytime you start there,
like
absolutely. When that's your lead, I remember there's this, I'm not even going to say his name, but there's a famous relative, there's an internet famous kind of militant Christian bloggy guy who his first book was like the Trinity of Sin or something like that. I'm like, what a terrible first note. Like that, now I'm getting fired up. That is the poison in the well. When your entry into the conversation is the Trinity of sin. I don't know that. It was the Trinity something, like the unholy Trinity. That was it. That was it.
Unholy
You might
Trinity.
even know what I'm talking about. And I'm like, I will not listen to you. I'm not going to do it, which is not me being intransigent. It's me saying when there is no nuance,
Yes.
there is no invitation to conversation. And that's for both sides of the argument. Anyway, where I was going with Bible for Normal People is they offer this really interesting critique of that progressive atheist blog post, this very trafficked website published, but it was basically challenging it, saying it isn't that if you're progressive you're going to become an atheist. It's so many people were handled too small a table, and once they start knowing gay people, knowing Muslim people, knowing atheists, knowing agnostics, knowing anyone, knowing African Americans, knowing whatever, fill in a non-dominant cultural identifier there. Once people start recognizing empathy, it's the sand won't hold.
No, absolutely.
And
I had it.
Yeah, go ahead. There's not much more other than just, please.
No, so I had an experience that I actively, like, a lot of times proximity to our recordings, life bleeds into the conversation because it's what's on our minds and it's what's happened recently. And I wasn't planning to bring this up, but it's just it's too there for the conversation. I wasn't. But I posted something to social media, and my premise was kind of a degree of what we're talking about right now, because I had been bothered for a really long time by the language of the choice between the lesser of two evils. When people use the language and they say, you have to choose the lesser of two evils, I was really bothered by that language. And so I was positioning in this premise on my post on social media. I said, that language is troublesome because I can't bring myself in moral consciousness to support any evil ideology. I do not accept the lesser of two evils ideology or that language.
Right.
And I said it has, and what I said was very personal in the post, as many social media posts are intended to be, I think. When they're minded the way that you and I would probably approach things. I said, it has been helpful for me to pivot the language from the lesser of two evils to the lesser of two burdens. Because what that does in just that semantic difference is it recognizes to me that there is a gravity to our choices. There's a weight that we are placing upon, and that any choice we make is going to place weight somewhere. Either we are going to carry some degree of weight on ourselves as we unbridle our neighbors of it and the people around us of it, or we are going to further push the weight away from ourselves and oppress it upon other people. And so thinking about this idea of the lesser of two burdens has been helpful to me to pivot away from that. And here was what I found extremely fascinating, because I did bring a bit of politics into the post, but where I got really challenged in the comments was by people who took it to mean, and in their comments, I'm gonna be blunt, and if one of them happens to hear this and feels that I'm misrepresenting this, then they can reach out to me. I'll be happy to continue.
Go to him directly. Don't go to the website.
No, don't do that. You could email us and tell us what you disagree with.
You can email him, not me.
No.
At Read Lackey on Twitter.
That'll work. But they thought I was unwilling to say that the current administration was evil.
Oh.
That's what they were taking me to task for, and it really fascinated me, because they were saying, like,
that was me. Everybody, he's calling me out right now in this conversation.
No, you did, and that's the thing is, like, they were, and what they were saying, and this is what was fascinating, is they read in that, so you don't want to say that the current administration is evil, and what I began to try to dialogue about it is precisely what I feel like you and I are talking about here, is like, I'm trying to elevate the conversation. That's a base conversation.
Right.
And whether or not I feel that way, or whether or not I think that way, that's not the conversation that we need to have, because it's not a productive one.
Right,
because
right.
we can speak truth to power, and we can call wrong wrong, and we can even call evil evil. But the moment that you take this whole group and you say, well, that's just evil, or that's just stupid, or that's just whatever, well, now you've led with that. It's the unholy trinity title. It's the why, if you're progressive, you are
right.
this
About to be an atheist or whatever.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's you are leading with the conclusion instead of becoming interested in having any sort of substantial dialogue. You are only interested in making your case and challenging it and wanting the other side to shut up about it if they don't feel the same way.
Right.
And to me, it was like, no, and I said this in the post. I said I can't remember if it was the post or the comments, but I said the longer we insist that good and evil are the language being used, the longer we insist that, the more ridiculous we find it that anybody would support the opposing ideology. And while I may sit in my stance and find it, difficult to swallow certain things that people adopt and certain things that people embrace, if I want to have any version of hope of not slipping into the same sludge, then I have got to be above that in my language and in my thoughts, and I cannot be dismissive or reductive, even if I would still challenge those ideas on those moral grounds.
Well, and that's why it's so hard. I'm sorry to cut you up, but
no, you're fine. You go ahead.
I want to talk, not be monologued at. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
It took 2 minutes.
I know. I'm kidding. One, I would agree with you. I think that claim is a bit misrepresentative of your intent there. And just as your copy editor read, I would like to offer an alternate phrasing that might be more workable for you.
Oh, nice.
That's the lighter of two burdens.
Right.
Because I think
I was just playing on the lesser words, but you're correct.
Sure. Okay, you win. But I think probably your intention, and I saw the post. I probably liked it actually and literally. But I didn't follow the conversation after it. I only do that when stones start flying because I want to pick one up.
That's right. Yeah.
But
there's a fight.
Yo, grenades in a backpack, catch. I think the better takeaway there is just, this is how you should approach life, right?
Yes.
What it's not, did God ordain me to wear this shirt today? It's, what will the ways I use my resources, how will those lessen the burdens of the most people? Because it's funny, you said the person's like, oh, you're not going to call this administration evil. My impulse, because I'm a snarky SOB, would have been like, I don't know. Did you buy from Amazon today? Like, I mean, I'm in the middle of, and it's actually a very short book. It's just, my reading is a little away from me right now, but a Roar book I got off their website. It's called What Do We Do with Evil? And it's, and there's this really powerful statement in it that basically says, the things we will agree to immorality when it benefits us.
Yes, correct.
And which, again, I do think it's a troublesome conversation to just suddenly be like, well, we all suck and we're all stupid and everybody's complicit in evil. Like, there may be some truth to that. And Roar definitely wasn't saying because of that you shouldn't ever make choices. No, it's more about, I keep thinking a lot about what was the episode where we were talking about the standing outside of the system, the orb. This is the image that's coming to me. This is, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks ago. But I think a lot about the self-awareness to step outside of the systems we're locked into. Yeah. And how hard that is. Because, would maybe my impulse, would maybe my desire be to, in the stream of this conversation, call this administration evil? Yeah, it would. is that super productive of a choice? I don't know about that. I mean, you and I, believe it or not, listeners might not believe it, but we occasionally have conversations off pod, and you can attest to this. There have been times I can recall in the last few years, I've called you burdened to say, at what point at what point do we get to use the word evil? Not because I'm dying to here.
Right. No, I understand. Right.
But because, my goodness. But the trouble you run into, and this because of off-pod conversations, as I've characterized people in my orbit on quote-unquote the other side, we're going to get called evil.
Oh, absolutely. And then the conversation stops.
Right.
It's just
Right.
over at that point. And it's about which evil you're willing to dismiss. Yes.
And
yeah.
I lament to my wife sometimes, and this is not the conversation for this, but I'm like, man, what sucks about not being on that other side is this winner card that likes to be played of the abortion word. I'm like,
right. Of course. Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm working to not dismiss and label. Like, it takes energy and effort to exercise grace and compassion. Please utilize the same courtesy.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise, bringing it full circle here, otherwise we're Amenabar and the others. There's nothing to be said.
Yes.
There's no conversation there's not a conversation being asked for. There's a statement being made. They're explaining, they're not exploring, Reed.
That's right. That's the thing. Man, I didn't even stumble on that. See,
I know.
You're good. You. But honestly, like, that's the issue for me is yes, first of all, I recognize not only my complicity, but my fallibility.
Right.
And the fact that I have things to learn.
That I won't recognize.
I ain't wrong.
I'm kidding. Holy crap. I'm kidding.
But the reality that I have so much to learn, and the reality that, and to me, understanding moral integrity means recognizing that, I go back all the time. I don't quote him as often as you quote Roar, but my version of your Roar is G.K. Chesterton. No, I'm just saying, like, I don't cite Chesterton quotes as much, but I do cite frequently when he said, he responded to the question from the newspaper that said, what's wrong with the world? And he wrote back, dear sirs, in response to your question, what is wrong with the world? I am. Sincerely, G.K. Chesterton. And it was this recognition of the problem is here.
Right.
And if I'm going to chase the solution to it, I have to recognize wherein the problem lies in me and be self-reflective, and then allow that to be the moral ground upon which I stand and challenge the things I see around me. And then it is not a matter of the Pharisee lifting up his hands and saying, God, I thank you so much that I'm not like all of these other people. I thank you so much. And that's the thing that really starts to get under my skin, is the ways I will hear both sides of the political aisle or the ideological aisle be like, man, I am so glad I'm not like them liberals. I'm so glad I'm not like them Republicans or whatever. And it's like, that's all you look like to me. Is you look like you're standing there with your hands held high and your head held up and say, man, I am morally superior to all of you trash over there. And whatever reality might be true of the implicit wrongness or the explicit evil in some of the ideologies being expressed, the position I want to continue to keep myself in is knees, hand beating upon my chest, say, have mercy on me, and let me recognize, not because I feel like I'm worthless trash, but because I recognize, no, I am incomplete in the sense of I am still in progress. I am still alive, dang it. I am still learning. I am still growing. I have not arrived at some plateau that says, oh, well, now this is it, and I'm just gonna, follow this constructed path all the way to glory land. No, I am in a relationship right now. I am not in a power structure. I am not in, my relationship with my wife, my relationship with my son. It is fluid. It is vibrant. It is alive. It means we will constantly challenge each other. We will constantly be different. We will constantly learn things. There will be moments of frustration and calamity. There will be moments of profound beauty and joy. And that is faith to me and what I want to continue to embrace, not some morally superior. Your ideas over there are ridiculous and stupid.
Right.
I want to embrace the full incarnational personhood of that and say, like, no, there is something above this that allows me to see people who don't adopt the same view of the world that I have and be able to still, God, please see them as human beings. And maybe they are approaching the conversation in a super ignorant or super reductive way. Maybe they are being fooled. Maybe they are being blinded. Maybe they are grace in that. Maybe they are absolutely sitting there. And I want to bring it back to the others in a kind of a validating way, much as I disagree with the film's approach to these subjects. I want to be the Mrs. Mills in that conversation, who is patient with her and who is tender with her, and when it happens, is willing to have a cup of tea and talk about it. And I don't like the way that the film, entertains these religious ideas, not because I wholeheartedly embrace those specific religious ideas, but just as we've already unpacked ad infinitum, I don't think that that's a substantially constructive way to go about the conversation. But what I do wholeheartedly embrace is that tenderness that Mrs. Mills has for Grace at the end, where she is willing to still be present. And as Matt Jameson would say, not in this film, but in The Leftovers, where he would say, let's be in it then, let's hold hands. Let's join together. As the scriptures call out for different reasons, come now and let us reason together. Let's talk about this. Let's be in the relationship together, and let's move.
Because
forward.
what's so fascinating about this thought came to me earlier, but it seemed irrelevant, and now it's kind of circling back around. Like, the better form, and I think the truer form of what happens in the others, is to say, the brain train here that just happened is your let's be in it then called to mind this foundation you're laying of relationship. And I feel like so many people, it's the unholy trinity conversation. So many people are content to, I actually like I like the way this is done in The Leftovers. I'm using the metaphor here. So many people are content to push each other down the well.
Yes, right, of course. Yeah.
Neglecting that they're supposed to jump into. That if I make my bed in hell, there you are.
Yeah, right.
The best form of the others is, the thought I had earlier was, if Christ can't be present in her purgatory, he can't be present anywhere. I mean, right? Like, yes, that's the essence of relationship, isn't separation and setting aside. It's utter and imminent joining.
Yeah.
At every metaphysical sphere.
Yes, absolutely.
To get really weird,
Absolutely.
Anyway, that yeah. I don't know. Good conversation, Riri.
Yeah, I actually really, I'm fine to kind of leave it there and pivot into the fog meter. If you
had more, I wasn't trying to abort that.
No. I feel really good about what we've discussed. I feel very invigorated by it. It's been refreshing to me, given some of the frustrations that I've had, about subjects like this. It's been refreshing to reflect on this with my friend. So no, that has been good. So you want to do the fog meter?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So,
every episode we discuss, every film we put through the rigorous metric of fear and God. Not too reductive there. How scary a thing is, how substantive a thing is. I will start with fear and let you start with God. I think it's effective as a scary movie. It especially, kind of the inverted haunted house motif. I'm going to go for a 7 on the fear factor.
I'm actually going to join you with your 7. I think that's an appropriate rating. It's it's definitely effective. And we didn't hit it for very long, but that whole I am your daughter moment, that is horror gold right there. Are you
mad?
Oh man, it is chilling and creepy and very, very effective. So yeah, I'll join you with the 7. The God meter is tough for me because I don't think there's nothing there. And I should be very explicit if listeners haven't already picked up on it, that the challenge I have is not so much what this film is about, but the way it's about it in terms of its thematic ideas. I'm not, frustrated by the fact that it's an anti-religious film. I think it does so in a terribly overly simplistic and reductive way, and that's what I have the issue with. And so to that regard, I'm going to give this a 3 on the God meter.
Yeah, I think. I mean, if our if our definition of the God meter is substance, there's not any there.
Yes, right.
It is one note clanged over and over.
Yes.
So I will partner with you in your 3. You joined me at my 7. I'll join Riri at his 3.
All right. And that means that we give The Others from 2001 film by Alejandro Amenabar, starring Nicole Kidman, Christopher Eccleston, that Miss Flanagan woman whose first name I don't know how to say. We give it a 5 out of 10 on the fog meter, which feels kind of appropriate. But the trickier question, particularly given the conversation we've had, is would you recommend The Others?
I think I do. I think, especially if someone's not seen it, because here's the thing, and you aren't saying this of yourself, I'm saying this for me. I'm not offended by what I think it's saying. I think it's a bit childish in how it's saying it. And so that's the only hiccup. And if anything, I feel like it makes for a worthwhile conversation. But in terms of the film, I think it's quite effective. I think if someone's never seen it, just, go into it knowing, okay, it may build up this straw man idea, but as far as what it does, I think it does it pretty well from a film standpoint. Yeah.
I would have to just, if I'm being honest with myself, I don't really recommend The Others, but I don't disagree with a word you've said. That, like, if you're looking for that chiller sort of vibe, have not seen it, and are okay sort of navigating around, sort of a trite overlaid message, then yeah, it is very, very effective. I think if I'm being honest with myself, I usually am pretty upfront about the fact that I don't care very much for The Others when it comes up in conversation. So, and I was genuinely optimistic that maybe I would feel differently about it this time around, but it only further solidified kind of what I had felt about it. And so yeah, that's where I'm at with that. But that puts this penultimate installment of this phase of hashtag in the morning in the books. So next week.
Hey, we should reiterate here, we did not in our call to action reference voting for 2020.
Oh, we didn't. And yes, we absolutely should. So if you've made it this far with us, ladies and gentlemen, please go to fearofgodpodcast.com, go to the banner at the top, click on the little button and vote for your favorite horror films of 2011 and 2012. The horror surveys are there, and we will be selecting after next week's episode. We'll be diving back into your favorite horror films from 2011 and 2012 with a specific conversation about one film from each of those lists. In the meantime, next week, watch the finale of season 2 of HBO's The Leftovers. That's it. No film associated with it, because after discussion about that finale, we're going to head right into our feelings in general about season 2 as a whole. So join us for that. Nathan, thank you so much for being willing to have this conversation with me. I really appreciate it, as always. And listeners, thank you so much for hanging in there with us for a bit of a longer episode, even for us. And as we say, right, and as we say on every episode, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but not the end of the conversation. And in that spirit, we encourage you to fear nothing else and be on your way rejoicing. We'll see you next week, everybody.
See you guys.